Welcome to The Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello and welcome. We are indeed very glad you're here, and I am very glad to welcome back Sue and Craig James. They were gracious enough to come on the program in October, and they were such a hit that we had the opportunity to bring them back, and they accepted. Typically, at the start of the show, so first of all, I'm sorry, welcome, Sue and Craig. Welcome and thank you.
Glad to be here. Thrilled to be here.
Thanks, be careful what you ask for.
Okay, well, all right, I will. You may remember from last time that I typically start these programs with some stupid contrived joke about Middletown, Connecticut. And I think when you were on, it was something about the guy who invented Scotch tape or something.
Mm-hmm. There's no joke in that.
Well, true. But I'm not going to do that today. Here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to ask you first. Are one or both of you aware of the speech that Jim Valvano gave at the ESPYs, I believe in 1993?
Well, in my case, I need to know who Jim is, and I'd have to know what the ESPYs were, and I had to be watching in 93, so no.
Okay. Jim Valvano was the coach of the University of North Carolina basketball team. Won at least one NCAA championship with them, and was diagnosed with cancer.
Right.
And on the first ESPY program, he spoke, and he was dying of cancer. I'm bringing that up because yesterday I watched the recording of our first program, and it reminded me of this from Valvano's speech. People say to me, how do you get through life? Each day is the same thing. To me, there are three things we should all do every day. Number one is laugh. You should laugh every day. Number two is think. You should spend some time in thought. And number three is you should have your emotions moved to tears. Could be happiness or joy, but if you laugh, you think, and you cry, that's a full day. Wow, that's a heck of a day. I'm sharing that with you because I watched the recording of our last show yesterday. Yesterday was a heck of a day. That was just so amazing. And I caught myself in the midst of every one of those emotions as I was watching that program. So my thanks to both of you for that.
Mark.
Well, thank you.
It was just an amazing thing. So,
well, if this was ever a checklist, the things you and Jim just cited, or on Jim's behalf, you just nailed. I was able to check number two. I'm already checking all three of those in like 3 minutes.
Well, then you had a heck of a day already. And I will also share this. Apparently, everyone who spoke at that program was timed. So Jim was looking at a clock and he said something like, I know my time is expired, but I'm not done. And what have I got to lose? So he just kept going. And he was so weak that Dick Vitale was standing there with him the whole time. Anyway, it was just a beautiful thing. So a couple of things occurred to me while I was watching that I would like to start our conversation with. You may recall that we were talking about hierarchies and what you encounter in the work that you do. One of the words that did not show up, I believe, in our entire conversation was the word culture. And I have this notion that culture is like honesty and integrity. And what I mean by those And you know what, Sue? It's perfectly analogous to your comment about don't tell him he's got the no-hitter going. Honesty and integrity are not things that you can talk about. You can demonstrate them. You can embody and manifest them, but I don't think it does anyone any good to talk about them. And the example I always use is if at some point we're all in the same room and I walk over and I shake your hand and say, "Hi, I'm the most honest person you've ever met." You're going to think a whole bunch of things about me, but that I'm honest will probably not be among them.
Except for that part. Yeah.
So my question to you is, do you put culture in that group? Do you think culture can be brought about by talking about it?
That group being words?
Integrity, honesty, culture. I
Those
put them together.
words. Those specific words.
Yeah, I don't know that you can bring about, whatever you want to call it, an effective, positive, reciprocal culture by talking about it. I think you have to do it.
Okay, I get it. I've got a few thoughts, Sue. What's going on?
Well, why don't you run and then I'll.
And I'm asking because you two obviously have more experience with that kind of thing than I do.
So it's interesting, Mark. Maybe a little bit of a Vulcan mind meld happened there, because as you were describing it, either who knows how the brain works. I either presuppose based on some initial energy or words you said that I wrote this, or I wrote it first and we just happen to be in sync. I don't know. We'll never know. But I was writing wordlessness as you were talking, or as you started talking, which is really interesting. Thus the Vulcan thing. And that's why I chuckled. I think you hit it on the head. Whether it's those particular words, integrity or honesty or trust, those principles, those beliefs, even those mechanisms, be truthful, verb or noun, doesn't do the trick. It may contain those things, but the culture is this amorphous. Doesn't mean absent. The more we try to define it, the more we try to put it in a spreadsheet, the less we'll be able to, because it's a thing, it's an entity. What came to mind is culture is a living, breathing entity, and it isn't any one of us. It's all of us, neither, both, and same with those words. Belief systems support. They might be the foundation to many things, including the culture, but the culture becomes living and breathing, and therefore I think some advisors, consultants, strategists would say, define it and it's in concrete. At least, Sue, I'd be interested in your thoughts. I don't believe that. I think culture is a process, not an end point, in my view.
Yes,
So,
and.
so are we on the same page?
Yes, and. Yeah, a couple thoughts hit me when Mark, you were asking, and one of them was Dr. Deming, W. Edwards Deming, the man who led the reconstruction of Japan. Statistician, economist. But one of his principles, I'm going to say, tenets is no slogans. No slogans. It'll always come back. Quality wise, job one. It will always come back. It will boomerang, and not in a good way. So at the same time, the other thought I had was, our words are also actions. Our speaking is an action. So how we say something, the words we choose to use is an act. I mean, words can be violent. Words can hurt. So, if we're talking about honesty and integrity being the drivers of culture, yeah, because it's what we honestly do, authenticity. is, if I'm having a bad day, I might be cranky, but that's my authentic cranky in the moment. I just stubbed my toe. I'm probably not going to be smiling and singing, so if we can accept each other where we are. So yes, I think, and one of the other things Craig and I would say is that demonstrate, don't tell.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Demonstrate.
You do say that.
Don't put a bunch of words on your website, on your web page. Demonstrate what leadership is on, if that's your service, right? Is teaching leadership. Demonstrate that on. Don't tell me that you're good at it. Demonstrate that you're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about yes and or plus.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean words aren't of service or that symbols and labels can't matter to help us have clarity. Perhaps maybe something that could be the magic formula, as if there is to be a formula, is to model and demonstrate, exhibit, practice, and then use the words. That was a wonderful example of operating with integrity, which is in alignment with the principles of our organization that supports our strategy. To use the words, because sometimes it becomes so amorphous. People do need words. I think we can have our cake and eat it too.
I think that we've heard this, right? You go to a company, if you're interviewing for a position and you're doing your research, and you go to the website and you look at what they list as their values, which, by the way, Craig and I choose not to use the word values. We use principles, because that often it becomes what we value when organizations are writing their values. And they will use big, lofty, it's like principles are non-negotiables. This is how I act, how I behave, not how I expect you to behave, right? It's not the checklist where I get to grade you. It's how I grade myself. It's what guides me in my decision-making in reaching our common goal that we've set forth and we've agreed upon together, that we're striving, that North Star. So, see if I can loop this back around, because I kind of went down a tangent there. Is that, we can say that one of our values or principle that I was talking about. Yeah, you go to a website and you see what a company's and organization's values are, and then you go for the interview. Now, how do you find out in these interviews, are these just words on a page, or do they really live them? And we've had organizations say, "Oh yeah, we have our values." Okay, what are they? Oh, and then they go into the computer to find them.
Yeah,
we've done those. You live them. That's the culture. You live the culture.
The whole thing about having to espouse values seems like a corollary or an inverse of something that some old timer told me in my first corporate job, which was never believe anything until it's officially denied. So when I hear people espousing that stuff, and nothing makes my heart sink faster than when I'm talking with a client and they say we need to write our mission statement. I want to recommend a book to you based on what you were both saying. Kenneth Burke wrote a book called Language as Symbolic Action. And in it, among other things, he says that man is the symbol-making animal, which is absolutely true. So it seems to me that and I was thinking about this earlier, Craig, the idea or the seeming contradiction that the more we try to define something, the more elusive it gets. And it's a lesson that I actually learned from my older son, Sean, who from the age of 22 was just a born basketball coach. And we went to see my younger son, Quinn, play basketball at Salve Regina University in Rhode Island. And Sean went with me. And the Salve games played out exactly the same way every time. They'd be getting blown out in the first quarter. The coach would wait too long to call a timeout. Then he would call a timeout. He would huddle up the players. He would reach into his left breast pocket. He would pull out an index card. He would look at the index card, put the card back, and then he would start screaming at the team. So afterwards, the boys and I went out for a pizza, and I said to Quinn, what is the coach pulling out of his pocket? And he said, oh, that's the game plan. And I said, and then what is he screaming about? And Quinn said, well, he's screaming at us that we're not following the game plan. So I looked at Sean and I said, I've never seen you with an index card. Do you have a game plan? He said, I have a plan for every game. I scout every team we're going to play. And this was the phrase that changed everything. But I have no idea what's going to happen until the ball goes up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it seems that what we're suggesting is that in not trying to define ourselves into corners, we're allowing for uncertainty.
Sure.
And I also have to think, Sue, of one of the words you used, which was trust. There has to be an enormous degree of trust among people to walk into uncertain circumstances, or else you either can't or don't do it, or you fail when you do it. You find that in your work?
Sue, you want me to? Okay, I can't. You're behind a thing on the screen, so I have to look over it. Oh, there. Okay, thanks. So Mark, you're speaking to a couple different things that I think we do see in our work. Again, for your listeners, we're consultants and coaches, increasingly more so coaches, one-on-one work, but we grew up doing strategy, business development, leadership, team development, mission statement writing, and the rest. But to answer your question, I think what we've discovered, especially since COVID, not because of COVID, but it's exemplary of moments in time in history when we get jolted a little bit. And even though we think that's all gone, that aftershock we're still experiencing for sure. In our psyche and our hearts, we're finding that in our coaching clients, people are seeking what am I doing? Why am I doing it? What really matters? So the aftershocks there. One of the aftershocks at an organizational level is I'm not going to say fallacy or impossible pursuit of strategic planning. And this is ironic because we've done strategic plans many times. So I'm not anti-strategic planning or a plan, but our good friend in common, Mac, I love how he speaks to the difference between planning and preparation. And as a sailor, he often talks about those that aren't so familiar with sailing will say, so Mac, where are you going? And what's your plan? And he said, I'm going sailing. Yeah, but where are you going and what do you expect and what's your plan? Where are you going? I'm going sailing. So I don't have a plan. You can't have a plan until that jump shot or the tip off.
Yeah.
Shouldn't use sports metaphors. I'm not the right one for that, Sue. That's your domain. You don't know, but it doesn't mean you don't prepare. Max said, I don't have a plan, but you can be damn sure I'm prepared. If the mainsail doesn't come up when I deploy it, that's a problem. So I prepare many things for safety, but I don't have a plan. So I think we're finding organizations are coming to terms with, or we might even help them realize that resilience, adaptation, adaptability, flexibility in strategy and plans doesn't mean you compromise your values or your mission as an organization. There are certain things that are not negotiable, but we can't anticipate. How could we anticipate that everyone's going to be working from home tomorrow? And now what was $1 million in revenue is $2,000 in revenue. I mean, plan for that. Or in California, we heard on the news that to address the fires in California, the number of fires and the number of square feet would require, in this one community, just one of the fires, the chief determined it would take 26,000 fire trucks. He said there are 26,000 fire trucks in California. So how do you plan? Planning is elusive, but prep, that's a different thing. So we're helping organizations prepare.
And I would say when we help organizations with their strategic planning, It's not a document that then goes in a nice, pretty binder and sits on the shelf. I would challenge that you look at it at least once a quarter. It's if not, and make adjustments to it. It's a guideline. It's where I'm planning. Mac probably does file a float plan when he sails, right? You're supposed to file a float plan. This is where I plan to go. This is what but if there's a storm, you're going to find another port. You're going to do something else if something happens to the rigging. So, planning is one thing, but, and we have a dear acquaintance, I'll say that, through a dear friend, who she said, look, I had it planned out. I was going to be an engineer. I got my master's, I got my PhD. I had everything was just perfect. And I was miserable. And she has changed her whole life. And she said, I have an idea of what I would like, but I'm not forcing it into happening. And I think of it as like a watercolor painting, just kind of, you impressionist. It's not a lot of detail in it, but it reveals itself, and those colors may morph into something other than what you exactly had pictured. We can drive things. We can force things into being. Doesn't mean we should, and doesn't mean it's healthy. So it's a Libra in me. Everything's in balance, right? Everything's balancing and harmony. Is that, we have some plans, we have some picture, we have some, Craig and I have things we really would like to do, places we would love to visit, places we would love to live, we think. We also have one last parent left, a 91-year-old mother. That's why we live where we are living right now, because she's a responsibility we have. There's a gift, there are gifts, there are challenges, and we're not doing some things we would like to do. But heard it once said, it's an obstacle or a challenge. The obstacle is that thing that will stop you from getting what you want. The challenge is that thing you got to go over, under, around, through, wade out. Here's the key, the difference between the two. I get to decide. I decide if it's an obstacle and going to stop me, or is this a challenge that's just something I got to figure out, and maybe I won't get it on my timetable.
Yeah, I was making a note, and I will come back to that note right after the break. We will take our first break here, and we will be back in 3 minutes. So please stay with us.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life, from any circumstances, a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome back. I forgot to turn my mic on. Thank you for staying with us. Sue, just before we went to the break, you were talking about obstacle versus challenge. And one of the words I thought you were going to use there was opportunity. So I want to tell you that there was a gentleman who is a former client of mine, who had what I'm going to call a gift for calling really trying circumstances opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him one day, his name was Leighton, for whatever that's worth. I said to him, Leighton, I have the feeling that if you observed someone rolling a grenade under my chair, you would tell me that I had the opportunity to leave the room. But what occurs to me is that the notion of opportunity connotes the opportunity to learn from whatever it is that you might perceive as an obstacle that you're willing to take on as a challenge. What do you think about that?
For me, I think life is learning. This is all journey. If we ever think we know it all, I know I've how's that for a phrase? I know I've been called a know-it-all, but I am wanting to learn and explore and understand. And to me, teaching isn't one way. I prefer to call it sharing, because if I share something I know with someone else, chances are they're going to share something with me, and vice versa. And that it's a sharing to educate each other. And it's while I do believe obstacle or challenge, I also have to stop myself and say, okay, am I allowing this to be an obstacle, or is this a challenge, just a challenge?
Yeah.
Want to stop and just breathe a minute and just take stock.
What, if I can interject, Sue? When I think of opportunity, I think of current state. And if we're to think in time and tense, current state or future is where the brain goes. Opportunity, challenge. Quite often, I forget what it is. Our brain's evidently 60, 70% of our consciousness is not in the present. It's past or future, recounting what's happened and anticipating what will. So there's a lot of conversation about being in the moment, the power of now. It's not the first time it's been mentioned, but it's fascinating to think that we're actually like in another time zones all the time. And so when we think about opportunity going forward, we quite often play tapes from the past that inform the future. And we make judgments as to whether it's an opportunity, challenge, or otherwise. And it's important to acknowledge we have a phrase we will use, careful not to Dr. Deming, not turn it into a meaningless slogan, but one of our mantras, at least, is to help people live regretless lives. And just recently, I put on my LinkedIn image banner due to a LinkedIn prompt that AI is saying, you might want to change this and have something more meaningful. And so I put just regretless, the two words, separately. And what I didn't type and I wouldn't type is regret not. And you were talking about learning, Mark, in that, quite often we go into repeated tapes of regret in the past. I shouldn't have, the shoulds and the could haves and all that stuff. And if we're not careful, we ruminate. There's a great book, if your listeners are interested in reads that are in this domain. There's a book called Chatter by Ethan Kross with a K, K-R-O-S-S. It talks about these monologues we have. And if we find repeating paths, there are techniques we can employ to sort of get out of that thought cycle if it's negative. But anyway, where am I going with this? Well, quick little story. I'm 61 now. And when I was 6.1 years old, so if my life to date is a minute, it was in the first 6 seconds of life. It's this hot summer day, running around with the sprinkler, and it's just great. Dad's, the classic TV show establishment shot, perfect summer day. The grill is grilling and Dad's got the thing on and he's flipping the burgers. And back in the 60s and 70s, you might recall, I'm looking at, Mark would recall, we had those spherical grills, right? And you cut them in half and the top was the top end. You took them off. What are they called, Sue?
Kettle.
Okay,
kettle grill.
Kettle grill. Right. So long story longer, my dad, puts it down on the concrete there by the garage, and I'm running around. And at 6.1 years old, it's like, oh, that'll be fun. I'll jump on, I'm jumping on things. So I am barefoot and I jump on the molten hot metal top of the kettle grill. Now, when we touch something like a hot stove, we are removing our finger by the time we touch something. I mean, it's instantaneous. However, gravity and body weight and muscle lag time isn't so forgiving. So, by the time I felt excruciating pain in my feet, all I could sense was even more pain because I had to step all the way down and let gravity do its thing before I could get the energy to jump off. So it felt like 10 times longer you're on there. And every square micro millimeter of your foot is now perfectly pressed.
Oh,
I mean, did I regret that after it happened and not be able to walk on my feet for a week? Yeah. However, I'll tell you what, now I'm 61, not 6.1, although I act 6.1 quite often. Every time I see a kettle grill or think of something hot, I act accordingly. So to your point, regret is useful. To have no regret, none, regret not. I wouldn't be living. I wouldn't be alive. I probably would have ended around 13.1 years old. So we learn from these things, but ruminate and beat ourselves up and lack compassion with our choices that were the best we could make at the time is useless. And that informs the opportunities we seize.
You mentioned that phrase "regretless lives" in our last conversation, and I wrote it down because I'm just going to suggest an absolutely beautiful poem called "The Tally Stick" by Gerald Ramsey, and Gerald is spelled Jarrold. The Tally Stick, absolutely gorgeous. Right. And Sue, if I cut you off right there, I'm sorry. Were you going to add to what Craig said?
No, not really.
Okay, I want to jump back, if I could, to the notion of value. And I understand why you prefer not to use value in your practice. I completely get that. But we can't ignore it completely. And when we talked last, Craig, you were talking about, the Venn diagram, and the thing that's most important is the world needs it now.
Ikigai. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And that connotes to me a necessary value, or the world wouldn't need it. But there are also aspects, well, maybe all of it. This also goes back to our conversation about money as symbolic.
Right.
So I would suggest then that most, if not all, aspects of value are subjective. Because if we take the typical formula, cost plus price, that does not equal value.
No.
The value is, I use subjective, it's intangible. And forgive me if I shared this story, but I learned that lesson in a very pragmatic way. I had a flat tire one day, and I went to this little shop. It was a cinder block building, one bay. The owner was there with a young kid who worked for him. So I walked in and I told the owner I had a flat tire that needed to be patched, replaced. I didn't know. So he sent the kid out to take care of it. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the name of this place was International Tire Distributors. So I was sitting in the office with the owner, and I said, I have to tell you, I admire your, I don't know what to call it, courage or optimism. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, you're calling this little place International Tire Distributor. I said, people like Town Fair Tire and Goodyear and Firestone must be absolutely killing you on price. And he said, no, they're not. And I said, why? And he said, because your price does not equate to your value.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, what do you mean? And he said, I'll give you an example. I bought a tire that Town Fair Tire was selling at $119.99, and I could sell it for $59.99 and make money. So I advertised them. I couldn't sell one. I upped the price to $109.99, a 10% price decrease from Town Fair Tire. I couldn't buy enough of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some very weird connection there, even though value is so subjective. Does that ever come up in your work with people? I mean, I've had that conversation with my clients.
Sure. I mean, first of all, value, we're not anti-value, by the way, just to clarify. We're just drawing a distinction between value and values. And if we're talking about principles and beliefs, the essentiality of being focused there, and sometimes values gets misunderstood for value. That said, to the topic of value specifically, yeah, sure does. I mean, because this very conversation is fodder for what happens. Just drawing this distinction between value and values helps us clarify what does the organization value and what do they believe. They're two different disciplines. They support each other, however, and what do they value will relate to their goals and picture and desired state for the future. So it's all useful. And this highlights full circle back to the beginning of our conversation, that there are some things that are wordless, almost impossible. Silence is so powerful, but it's not filled with words. But they can be very important, and operational definitions in our work are essential because of what we were talking about early, mission statement. And I saw your nonverbal there, like the pain of going through that. Well, what does mission even mean? Mission, vision, values, strategy, principles, goals, objectives, dependent tasks, all these things are popular terms in strat planning and project management, and they lose their meaning. I've heard it said, there was a woman that did a talk on nonverbal communication. Interesting. By the way, evidently we tune into 12.5 times more information with nonverbals than what we hear. She was saying that the, hey, how are you phrase that we've heard a million times or said a million times in our lives, our brain doesn't even pick it up because it's just, I don't need that. I hear that all the time. It doesn't mean anything. So we think about how do we ask people how they are when we ask how they are. Same with strategy, innovation, collaboration. All that stuff loses meaning, and it's important to define. Back to value. I love this. I'm fiddling with my pen here. So this is a exceptionally cheap pen, a Pilot I don't want to disparage the brand. A Pilot G207. Here's the accolades. We have a bunch of these because they work really well. So what's the value? If I'm in the old days, you'd go in the boardroom as a young sales guy. It was essential to have your Mont Blanc pen and see how successful I am and all these symbols. This wouldn't be so valuable in that context. If I'm on a hike and I need to remember stuff to save my life, but there's no convenience store in sight, and this is the only pen I have, this is priceless. Value shift. Same item, totally different. If similarly I'm on a spaceship, and again, there's not a convenience store to buy another pen, and it's the only pen you have, this is priceless, except for the fact that this won't work in weightlessness. And it's worthless, but a pencil would be invaluable because it would work. So that, subjective, but yet very real.
And contextual.
And contextual for sure. Yeah.
And you may be getting a gross of Pilot pens from Pilot because they want you to know that they have designed those to work in space now.
Okay, there you go.
I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying.
You reminded me of something, Craig. You can't see this because it's off camera, but I have a little file cabinet sitting next to my desk. I honestly couldn't tell you how many cross pen sets I have in there. Right now, I'm using this cheesy pen that I got from the bank where I recently moved my business account. Works great. Yeah, I love that notion of value. And I also want to, when you were talking about how are you, have you ever heard of banner blindness?
No, but I can guess what it is.
Okay. Well, you want to guess?
I have a feeling there's a certain amount of, there's a thing called functional fixedness. A science guy, cognitive scientist named Tony McCaffrey, Dr. McCaffrey, talks about quite often our inability to see things right in front of our face.
Mm-hmm. So banner blindness is a phenomenon that evolved from the ubiquity of web-based advertising. And there are numerous studies, they're not even new anymore, that we don't even see banner ads anymore. We just don't see them. It's not that we necessarily or deliberately ignore them. We don't see them.
I'd like to give credit to the things I cite, by the way. The 12.5 times noticing nonverbal. There's a woman named Vanessa, for your listeners, Vanessa Van Edwards, with an S at the end, Vanessa Van Edwards. And she has a talk that her friend Charlotte put out there on LinkedIn. Okay. It's a great video on communication, very usable. The other thing you mentioned earlier too, Mark, for your listeners, Ikigai. Some folks might be familiar. Pronounced Ikigai, like E, a key, and a guy. It's spelled IKIGAI. And yes, the world needs it now is the fourth circle. The other three are, I love it, I'm great at it, I can monetize it. Find the intersection, you've got something.
Perfect. And on that note, we will take our second and final commercial break, and we will come back in 3 minutes for our final segment. Keep it where it is.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back, everyone. I did remember to turn my microphone on this time. I won't even ask for extra points on that one. It just so here's what I would like to do. There are two things that you said last time. I believe it was you, Craig, and you were being your characteristic, humble self. Sue, if you want to take issue with that, please feel free. But you were talking about some of the things that you do, and that some of it was, I don't know that you necessarily use the word commonsensible, but you said that doesn't mean we don't get some credit. And then later in the conversation, you talked about having and I don't remember the word you used, whether it was wherewithal, comfort, vulnerability, or something to say, I don't know. It I don't know how to say this. It makes me wonder if it's possible to be able to give ourselves credit for something, even if there are times in which we have to say, I don't know, or are we able to give ourselves credit because we have the wherewithal, courage, vulnerability to say, I don't know. But I love that juxtaposition.
I guess if I'm the one who said it, maybe you're perhaps looking for me to expound or clarify. I do have some thoughts, but I've been talking a lot, Sue.
Well, I'm waiting for Sue to say that you're not humble at all.
It's one, classic joke. It's one of my greatest qualities is my
there you go.
My being humble.
No. The phrase is, I'm not conceited. That's what makes me so great.
That's right. Well, that's true too. That's true. That's what I meant.
Oh my God, I love you. Too.
Or I've heard it said, I'm not conceited. That's one of my greatest qualities.
That's right. Oh man. So do you have a thought or two on that?
Well, I think that came from leadership, right? We were talking about leadership and going into positions and leaders feeling the need, especially new young leaders, managers. I have to have the answer. I have to have the right answer, and to be comfortable with saying, I don't know, let's figure this out together, and allowing the team members to be able to say they don't know, and how that can breed actually strength. Right? Because we're only as strong as our weakest link. And if we don't admit what that is, then we are, I guess the word isn't vulnerable. The word is at risk.
Bingo.
Phrase,
I'm trying to remember, Sue, if it was Daily Creative. Again, for your listeners, Mark, being in the communication business, many are perhaps in the creative or communication space. There's a podcast called Daily Creative. Todd Henry is the host, and he doesn't just talk about like marketing strategy and graphics. No, it's and life and leadership baked into, and it's not limited to creatives. It's either that one or Hidden Brain that was talking about. There is a certain point in human interaction and business where status establishment is important. One can be over humble, self-effacing, and then we look for signals. We look for strength and confidence and competence. So there's a balance. Yet at the same time, as we talked about last time, there's incredible power in humility and vulnerability. Brene Brown, probably our leading thought leader on that at the moment. And we can all identify with it in real life. I know exactly what it is. Very overly assured turns into arrogance and overconfident, and then you don't believe it. And then what's the real truth? No one knows everything about everything all the time. Great leaders or presidents are going to look at their cabinet and then make the call. They're going to listen, engage, and look for insight because they're smart enough to know they don't know everything. If someone thinks they do, then they've lost credibility with me right away. But to have the sensibility and judgment to know what you don't know breeds confidence. There's the irony. I'm more confident in Mark because he so confidently said he didn't know this, but he does know that.
Which gives me confidence when he says he does know something.
Exactly. Which is rare, but it's confidence building when that happens.
And it goes back to your culture question on culture and honesty and integrity and authenticity. It circles back to that, right? And trust. I can only trust you if leaders have to know, and we keep saying leaders, but it's humans. What are our limits? We all have limits.
There's a beautiful Don Henley song that you probably know called "The Heart of the Matter." Mm-hmm. And there's a line in there, I'm going to badly paraphrase it, but it's something along the lines of, everything I thought I knew, I have to learn again. So here's a question. Mm-hmm. Sue, you mentioned that we're only as strong as our weakest link. Mm-hmm. And Craig, you were talking about humility and vulnerability. I think weak links are simply real. They have to be contended with. Do we think that the weakest links in organizations are the ones who might mistake the leader's humility and vulnerability for weakness?
One more time, Mark.
Do we think that, I'll put it a slightly different way, that the weak links in an organization are the ones who might mistake the leader's humility and vulnerability for weakness?
Okay. So you're going to say?
I'm trying to rephrase it. I'll just say it. Right. There was a book written, The Black Swan. He wrote another book called Anti-Fragile. Right. So that strong, stable, rigid. And then you have the reed. Well, it's a teacup. Right? A teacup is strong. It's rigid. It's not flexible, but it's highly fragile. Anything rigid is easy to, you're like this. Someone can push you over. When you're relaxed, you just kind of, right? You just kind of flex with the movement that comes with you. So if I have to know it and I have to be right, I think that sometimes some people want that certainty. I think when we have people who live in a very black-white binary world, right, wrong, good, bad, they want this. It's because they're coming from more of a place of fear and scarcity that are coming from a place of love and abundance.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I need to know for sure. Tell me yes. Tell me let me see at a distance where danger is, where the threat is. And now I'm looking at everything seeing a threat.
Yeah.
Versus the opportunity.
So Sue, I think Sue said it gooder than I could. So I think that's a great answer. Go ahead, Mark.
No, please.
I have a compulsion. Citing third-party sources. I know some folks aren't fond of that, but hopefully it's useful to your listeners. And then if I do cite, I do want to give credit again. You mentioned uncertainty. Well, I didn't even mention her yet, but something your listeners might enjoy if you're dealing with uncertainty, how to cope with it, how to leverage it, actually use it as a tool. Maggie Jackson has written a book called Distracted and Lately Uncertain. And she talks about the power of uncertainty and that flexibility that Sue's speaking to, that if we are more agile and adaptive, we can welcome these things we don't know are going to happen. And then that's a source for creativity. We also, back to the banner blindness, I think used a different term, Mark, but the idea of not seeing what's right in front of our face. And I cited Anthony McCaffrey, Tony McCaffrey, Dr. McCaffrey. You can find him on HBR. He wrote a wonderful piece about the Titanic and the sinking of it and how, cut to the chase, no one could see the iceberg as a lifeboat. So we miss things that are right in front of us. And then one last thing I'll cite before we're done. I know time's up. If you can give 28 seconds before we wrap, I'd like to bring another book to the fold that people might enjoy about regret less. I'll say it right now. To clients, we recommend books and it's dangerous. You recommend it over the years and then you realize, oh my gosh, I haven't read this in a while. So you pull it out and you read it. A guy named Parker Palmer wrote a book called Let Your Life Speak. And he speaks to listening to what our life is. And I had it right in front of me. I'm going to make a quick little quote here. He actually quotes a poem by William Stafford. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Sounds like, okay, what's the point? And then you read a little further and it's really powerful. He unpacks that and the meaning of the poet. And he challenges us to realize the life I am living is not the same as the life that wants to live in me.
Oh.
The third party is the idea of your life. And it wants to live in you. You don't want to live your life necessarily. And to really pay attention, what is the life that is intended to live in me? I think it's just so powerful. Let Your Life Speak. It's a beautiful book.
I'm going to, self-serving as this might be, I'm going to relate it to a comment I believe I made to you yesterday in email about being more comfortable with letting my life speak as I get older. And I think there are a lot of factors in there. Okay, yeah, so I'm really sorry, but we're coming up to the end. Yeah. So again, please remind our viewers and listeners how they can find you. And before you do that, I'm just going to tell everybody who's tuning in or listening later, you absolutely need to find Craig and Sue, please. So go right ahead.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's as we said last time, CatalystStrategies is our firm. It takes effort to spell it, remember it, type it for sure. So Cat-Strat became our nickname. Cat, C-A-T, like meow, -strat, S-T-R-A-T.com. And we'd love to hear from you anytime, all the time. And our LinkedIn profiles. Craig James, Cleveland, Cat-Strat, you'll find me. And Sue James, same.
Okay. Once again, I thank you both sincerely. I don't know if you'll take this as a threat, but I've already made some notes and I'm thinking about things we really need to talk about. So if you're game, I would love to have you come back and do this again. In addition to the fact that it's just consistently rich, I just so much enjoy your company. So please do come back.
I got you, Mark.
Thank you. It's a joy to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I thank everyone who joined us today. And I will remind you, I will be back 1 week from today at the same time. And I hope to see you then. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.